Today's next lecture is on mind control. Mind control is also called brainwashing. It is a contentious issue, as we will see, and I'm going to talk about the methods by which it can happen. Now, you won't see this as a typical topic in psychology textbooks because it's not directly related to psychology. It's a kind of application of psychology. And usually introductory or general psychology textbooks are not about application, they're more about theory. So this is just going on my, I want to talk about mind control because I think it's something to be aware of, and I don't think it's taught in any other classes really. And I think it's such an important topic that everyone needs to know about it. I just thought it would be great to add to our course. All right, so mind control. It's defined as brainwashing or thought reform or re-education. It's the process by which a person is persuaded to give up their personal beliefs and accept those which are in direct contrast to their own beliefs, their own pre-existing beliefs. The process usually occurs in a managed environment and involves the systematic application of psychological techniques. Just realized that I don't yet have subtitles. This is the hardest thing to figure out how to do this each time. Good. All right, testing. No, I guess not yet.
May I ask a question from the previous topic?
Sure.
It's about the ethical issue
Uh-huh.
from the studies. Like, for example, if there's a study that want to prevent demand characteristics, so they deceive the real aim of the study, and if they explain like the real aim of the study later on, when the experiment is done, will the institution accepted it as like a study? Will it be published or yeah?
Okay, so if demand characteristics are not controlled, in other words, there's a strong placebo effect or a strong effect of the experimenter on the participants. Really, that's what it is. Strong effect of the experimenter on the participants. The study may or may not be accepted for publication if the peer reviewers find that seems like too big of a problem. Then they may say, no, you cannot publish in this journal.
So it depends on which topic the study looks into, right?
Actually, it really depends on the reviewers.
Oh, okay.
So when you submit your research study to a journal, they will assign it to some reviewers who are usually in the same position as you. They are usually researchers at institutions. They have their own teaching jobs and they don't have a whole lot of free time, but they give up their own time on a voluntary basis to review anonymous peers' research. I've done this a few times, and as reviewers, we judge the quality of the research, and if we think that the participants are just behaving to please the researcher, or if the researcher's aims are too obvious to the participants, then we would point that out and say that that's a problem, and we might recommend that the article not be published.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so that's the definition of mind control. It's a process that usually occurs in a managed environment and involves the systematic application of psychological techniques.
Hi, I have a question. Would
Yeah.
this, like, the PowerPoint would be shared with us later on?
It's already shared.
Yeah, it's on view, like we can view it.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
if you
Thank
go to your Google Drive in the shared section, it should be there.
All right, thank you.
However, it's possible that it's not in your Google Drive. I did get a lot of emails that said there was a kind of rejection message.
Like, I got only the first presentation, but I didn't get the second one that we are using right now.
Oh, same here.
Send it on the
Me
group
too.
if you want.
What was that?
Teacher, I can send it on the group if you want, the line group.
Yes, sure. Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. Okay, mind control defined. Continuing to be defined. The process by which individuals or collective freedom of choice and action is compromised by agents of or agencies that modify or distort perception, motivation, affect, cognition, or behavioral outcomes. A process that involves a set of basic social psychological principles: conformity, compliance, persuasion, dissonance, reactance, guilt, fear arousal, modeling, and identification are some of the staple social influence ingredients, well studied in psychological experiments and field studies. In some combination, they create a powerful crucible of extreme mental and behavioral manipulation when synthesized with several other real-world factors, such as charismatic, authoritarian leaders, dominant ideologies, social isolation, physical debilitation, induced phobias, and extreme threats or promised rewards that are typically deceptively orchestrated or an extended amount of time period in settings where they are applied intensively. Now, you can see from this list that mind control is not limited to a particular method. Mind control is any and all methods that control or seek to control people's opinions. So it's, oh, one moment. Just give me one.
Hi, I can't hear you.
He said one moment.
Yeah.
Hi guys, sorry for that interruption. All right, I'm back. So what I was saying is that mind control is not specific to a method. It's anything that, any method using any kind of psychological strategy, technique, or explanation that has the effect of basically influencing people's thoughts and beliefs in a strong way. Now, we always influence one another's thoughts and beliefs just by interacting with each other on an everyday normal basis, and we don't call that mind control. So the difference between mind control and just everyday normal influence is basically just a matter of degree. If it's a little, we don't call it mind control, and if it's a lot, if it's very strong, then we start to call it mind control. By the way, this lecture is composed mostly of quotes. So I'll be doing a lot of reading of quotes. Mind control defined further. Brainwashing or thought reform falls into the sphere of social influence. Social influence happens every minute of every day. It's the collection of ways in which people can change other people's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Some definitions of brainwashing require the presence of the threat of physical harm. Other definitions rely on non-physical coercion and control as an equally effective means of asserting influence. Feel free to interrupt me at any moment during this lecture as I'm reading these slides, if you have any questions or comments. Techniques. It requires the complete isolation and dependency of the subject. The agent, or the brainwasher, must have complete control over the target. So sleep patterns, eating, use of the bathroom, fulfillment of other basic human needs depends on the will of the agent. This is one kind of technique where they become the person that you're brainwashing is completely dependent on you to relieve them of their suffering. So that's one technique. Mind clouding is the technique using techniques like sleep deprivation, malnutrition, starvation. The presence or constant threat of physical harm are typically part of the process to cause the target difficulty in thinking critically and independently. So when they cannot think critically and independently, they start to rely on the torturer, the captor, for their dependence, for their safety. And this leads to a profound state of suggestibility. Certainly this is not ethical. I'm not talking about ethics in this lecture. I'm not advising you to use mind control techniques on other people. Rather, I'm giving this lecture for you to be on your guard and aware of the techniques of mind control so that you can be more prepared and less of a victim, because there is well, it's not like there's just a chance. It's almost like there's a guarantee that you will be attempted to be mind controlled by anyone who can use these techniques, including authorities, various authorities. That's really the reason I'm giving the lecture, to help you be prepared. Robert Lifton studied released prisoners of war in the Korean War time, in the 1950s. He identified 3 major stages of brainwashing. They are breaking down the self, which is destabilizing the sense of self, which is your identity. So your sense of identity is destabilized. That often happens with the previous techniques I mentioned, kind of torture and withholding of basic human necessities. The next stage is introducing the possibility of salvation. That means giving the captive some hope that their life will not always be in this great state of suffering. So it's to get them to drastically reinterpret their life history, radically alter their worldviews, and accept a new version of reality and causality. You do this by statements, suggestions, and you basically force the person to agree or comply with this kind of mentality or concept or theory that you're giving them. And the third phase is to rebuild the self. So you've already broken them down, given them a new message, now you rebuild them. That means you give them back some of their freedoms and their rights. You develop in the person a dependence on the organization, though, and you thereby turn them into a deployable agent of the organization. So you make them think and feel that they are a member, an important, beloved member of your organization, after you've already done all of the torturing and mind washing, mind controlling ideas. So then you rebuild them up and they are a loyal member of your organization, apparently. By the way, I give more techniques, more details of these techniques in the notes section of this slide, if you can access it. Here's the 8-step strategy for mind control. This will go across several slides. So one step is environmental control. Limit access to outside influences. As long as people can access the outside, they can get enough support from others to prevent themselves from being mind controlled. But if you block that external access of influence and communication from others, then you can get better control of them. So people fear for people prevent them from contacting other people. You can do this by instilling a fear of contamination by outsiders. Communication could be discouraged and criticized, requiring special permission to visit, call, email, or message family and friends. Maybe one-way communication is only possible. You can contact them, but you cannot receive messages from them back to you. Maybe this requires you to sever relationships. What I'm describing is sometimes happens in cults, C-U-L-T, cult, which is usually a religious group, extremist group. And another limitation is of information. To disallow internet, news, books, critical thinking is discouraged. Next step, mystical manipulation. When the leader selects or creates information about the past and present to persuade others that he or she is special. So that the leader is made to appear as though they are magic or holy or gifted or chosen, and that they who follow and join become special. So this is already like an incentive for the ego of the followers. Once this specialness is claimed, the cult leader is solidified. The cult, the group, is solidified, and members will defend their leader against criticism and will accept abuse and personal loss for the greater good of the leader and the group's mission and for promised eventual benefits. Staying in the group, members usually believe membership pleases God and leaving is abandoning God in their own spiritual gains, and membership is strengthened by fear of leaving. The next step is demand for purity, where guilt and shame are powerful emotions which can be used by leaders to control members, guilting or shaming them to do this or not that. Using very strict black and white definitions, leaders expand their definition of evil to include so many other include thoughts and behaviors that the members are overwhelmed with their own sense of guilt. Leaders rely on shame-based manipulations to coerce members' behaviors. The demand for purity often becomes a demand for time, and the leader directs or guilts their members to spend evenings and weekends in certain duties or attending certain group functions or gatherings, which also controls their environment. Again, the more of their time that you can control, the more control you have over them and their lives and their thinking. The leader accuses members of sinful attitudes, selfish, immaturity, pridefulness, holding on to ulterior motives. All of these accusations instill more guilt and fear of themselves, which weakens their own identity. These accusations cannot be refuted because they are not false. It's hard to prove that you're not prideful, that you're not immature, that you're not holding ulterior motives. So because you cannot prove it false, you're likely to accept it as true. Such accusations serve to further shame and humiliate members into submitting to suggested modes of behavior and living. Step 4, confession. Members are encouraged or pressured, either by the leader or by the group norm, to reveal deeply held secrets of their own past faults in front of the group, thereby exposing them to making them feel vulnerable. If members do this, but the leader does not do this, then the leader is seen as more controlled, holier, less vulnerable, stronger than the members, thereby gaining rightful claim to the position as leader. The members fix their sins. If the members fix their sins or problems, the leader loses that right or authority over them. So the leader holds their sins over them as a permanent fixture, if possible, maybe by perpetual accusations against them. These 8-step strategies are, it looks like, geared mostly toward describing religious cults. There were a lot of religious cults in the 70s, it seems like, maybe 60s as well, at least in America. I don't know about Thailand, but the cults, the religious cults and their methods are general methods that could be used for any other purpose, not only for religious purposes. Step 5, sacred science. This is unquestionable perfection about the teachings of the leader. The unquestionableness, or the unquestionable nature, discourages critical thinking. The leader is called an expert, or thought of as an expert, and the members cannot hope to contribute anything further. The leader's teachings are hailed as perfect because the leader is seen as perfect, nearly perfect, gifted, highly evolved, chosen, perhaps evidenced by the leader's flamboyant, charismatic personality. Thus, the leader's teachings have high authority. Members sacrifice critical thinking with faith in their leader. Members' questions are discouraged. The leader's word is final, the only right way to think and behave. As I'm reading this slide out loud, I'm reminded of one of my personal friends who loves to talk about this one scientist, mathematician, quantum physicist. He always talks about him. He says he's the next Einstein, better than Einstein. And now I can I can see that this is a case of this sacred science where the scientist is looked upon as so high and so infallible that the admirers or the fans will follow and believe anything that the chief scientist says, and will become like basically a disciple. Now, discipleship in itself is not bad. We all have things to learn from others. It's just in the extremity, in the extreme, it can be bad when we are no longer able or willing to think for ourselves. So we should balance advice from a trusted and respected leader with, that should be counterbalanced with our own critical thinking. Because if we stop critical thinking, then we become sheep. Eight steps. All right, step 6, loading of language. To manipulate words and phrases to produce thought-terminating cliches, which result in a narrowing and constricting of thought processes. If you can control the meaning of language, you can control people's thoughts. Because people often rely on verbal thinking for their thinking. So if you can control the language, what people can say and can't say, and the definitions of words, then you might be able to control their thinking through language. An example is any criticisms toward the group may be labeled as slander or persecution. These words are instrumental as they indicate threat against the group. So if you're already a member of a group, a cult, and then the leader says that any criticism is persecution of your group, then that isolates and blocks all critical messages, so you can no longer get critical messages from the outside world. So that's one clear, good example of how language can be used to further the cult control. The criticizers may be labeled enemies. Thus, the members are unable to consider criticism because they are direct attacks. That's how they're thought of. Also, critical thinking is suppressed. Shaming words like distrustful and rebellious serve expanded meanings and functions by shutting down questioning or critical thinking behavior, as well as heightening shame or guilt. The leaders may expand a word's meaning to include wider meanings, so that the words like inappropriate come to mean sinful also. The leader can accuse members of sinful behavior using a word that is more difficult to refute, the word inappropriate, in order to suppress thoughts and behaviors that are not approved of, without inciting members to question the behavior as sinful, yet implying it by association, by adopting the word inappropriate to mean sinful. So it's expanding the definition of the word. By associating one word's meaning with another word, the two words are taken to mean the same thing automatically, and thus strange interpretations of familiar facts and knowledge, like strict scriptures, can be retranslated to mean something different, and the group will accept it. Because the vocabulary and the, hold on, I can't read the slide, meaning are understood, it passes the sense filter as valid reasoning. Step 7, doctrine over person. The individual's personal choice in many matters are taken as departures from the group ideals. So personal choice starts to be frowned upon. Personal choices are reduced and replaced with standards and group norms, such as how to dress, wear one's hair, etc. Personal experiences are prescribed. Members are supposed to feel enthusiastic at times, mournful and sober at times, conscience-stricken at times. Members must feel it or fake it until they believe they feel it, perhaps insincerely, or else they will be seen as non-committed and rebellious. Coming up short or feeling fake about one's identity in these behaviors keeps one immersed in feelings of personal guilt, perhaps serving to reduce criticisms against the leader. All of this presumes that people want to remain part of the group. Now that is true. It's true in cults because the cult is isolated from the rest of the world. So their members' only access to other human beings is by remaining part of the group. And they do this to themselves. They don't know, they don't realize how much they do it to themselves, but they do. They self-isolate and they become controlled. They allow themselves to be controlled to the point where they no longer feel they have control. And they depend on the acceptance of the group for their own personal sense of identity and value and worth. Finally, step 8, dispensing of existence. Robert Lifton writes, the totalist environment draws a sharp line between those who have a right to exist and those who do not. They claim that those outside their group have no right to exist, or at least say that those outside the group are inferior. This is to help the group's self-esteem, the group esteem, or the self-esteem of the members of the group. But it's also very polarizing, making you completely for the group and against everyone else. The group thus has an arrogant and elitist mentality, considering themselves superior rather than having equal rights as other humans. Those who do not conform to their path of existence are targets of rejection or annihilation. Examples are Christian crusaders, Hitler's Aryans, Al-Qaeda's Muslims. All of these have judged others as less worthy of existing. Leaders of cult groups cultivate an orientation of secrecy, elitism, and superiority. The results of exclusivity is a us versus them mentality and devaluation of the thoughts and values of other human beings. Now, the us versus them mentality is actually quite innate in human beings. We all have it, but we don't all choose to focus on it or make that our presiding motive. So we can also change the us versus them into an us versus us so that there is no enemy, but without kind of training for this, we tend to fall into an us versus them perspective just by nature, by default, it seems like. But the devaluation of other human beings to the point of killing them would be extreme and perhaps the goal of a mind control agenda to make people instruments of war. Yes.
Excuse me, Professor, I have one question.
Yes.
For the egg step that we just learned, how long does it take to manipulate someone?
Great question. Let's mentally estimate as we go through. Controlling environment could be quick. Mystical manipulation, that takes like, you know, a few inspiring speeches, demanding purity, that could be in a talk, confessions, sacred science. All of this could happen within the space of a few meetings, loading of language. That also, though that would take longer. I would take a larger number of meetings. This also would take longer, step 7. And step 8 would probably come at the end of a program. So I would say anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks. It could be relatively quick, depending on how quickly you or how often you meet. If you're meeting every day, it could be within a week that you become mind-controlled agents. But that's kind of unlikely because people are not very willing to give up so much of their time and control immediately. It's usually a more slow and gradual process happening, like a meeting once a week or twice a week or 3 times a week, and then it builds to, and then the strategies kind of intensify. So it would normally be a process that takes place over months, normally. Good question.
Oh, thank you.
Mind control methods used by sex traffickers. Well, every goal might use its own method. So sex traffickers tend to use the following methods. They feign love. That means they fake it. They act like they love a girl or potential worker. They show concern for their well-being and they gain their trust, and then they promise high income or marriage, or or they say you can pay off your debts, and that's so they give some kind of a priceless reward first, like taking them to another country through proper or improper migration channels. And then they say, okay, now you owe us a debt, and this is how you pay it off. Then they isolate and control them through drug dependency. Maybe they ask for service to pay for the drug habit. They use fear tactics like fear of law enforcement, fear of deportation, and threats to friends and family, or shame. And then there's the case of Stockholm Syndrome, which is when the traumatized victim bonds to the abuser. I'm not completely clear on the psychology of Stockholm Syndrome, but it's a pretty well documented and common finding and effect. How effective is mind control? The modern techniques of brainwashing and menticide is just another word for extreme brainwash. It's like when the person no longer thinks for themselves. They give up all their control to the leader or agent. Those perversions of psychology can bring almost any man into submission and surrender. Many of the victims of thought control, brainwashing, and menticide that we have talked about were strong men whose minds and wills were broken and degraded. But although the totalitarians used their knowledge of the mind for vicious and unscrupulous purposes, our democratic society can and must use its knowledge to help man grow, to guard his freedom, and to understand himself. So this quote is saying that who can be mind controlled? Well, almost anyone. I mean, it says strong people, strong men whose minds and wills, just about anyone can be mind controlled. That's the sad truth. But certain people will be more easily mind controlled than others. So I'm not going to say that everyone can be mind controlled. Some people may be so resistant that no one can figure out how to control them. And I encourage you to become that. As mind control techniques become refined and strengthened and perfected, I encourage you to be those strong-minded individuals that are so difficult to mind control that it's almost impossible. So many experts believe that even under ideal brainwashing conditions, the effect of processes are most often short-term, but instead is, the brainwashing victim's old identity is not in fact eradicated by the process, but instead is in hiding. And once the new identity stops being reinforced, the person's old attitudes and beliefs will start to return. I believe that. I believe that it's very difficult to permanently brainwash someone. I don't know if it's possible. It may require a continual redosing or refreshing of brainwashing tactics to keep someone under mind control when you're releasing them out into the field like a Soviet spy or undercover agent that's in the field for years and years. What can mind control accomplish? When systematically practiced by state-sanctioned police, military, or destructive cults, mind control can induce false confessions, create converts who willingly torture or kill invented enemies, and engage indoctrinated members to work tirelessly, give up their money, and even their lives for the cause. So although mind control may not last forever without continuing to refresh it, but once it is instilled in a person's mind for that period of time that it lasts, the mind-controlled victim will be so mind-controlled that they will be willing to kill or die for the cause, for the leader, for the agenda that they have been pressured to believe in. After all of us require a purpose for living and a purpose for dying. You know, something that would motivate us strongly enough to kill or to be killed. We all require it, and we all need it to do such drastic things. But it's very possible to have those purposes and beliefs instilled in our minds by authorities that know how to do it. Historical examples include prison camps of communist Russia in the early 1900s, where political prisoners were routinely re-educated to the communist view of the world. The Chinese thought reform program achieved mass societal conversions to new beliefs. Nazi re-education programs in German schools were used to educate people to see Jews as inferior. Stalin's adversaries publicly confessed to their treasons, even though they were false. Catholic Cardinal Mendenzi gave false confessions favoring his communist captors. American airmen held in prisoner of war camps during Korean War falsely confessed to engaging in germ warfare and pledged allegiance to communism. However, when they were brought back to America for a few months, they no longer pledged allegiance to communism, so it's a time-limited influence when it's not continually refreshed. And the People's Temple cult leader Jim Jones got 900 people to commit suicide or murder friends and family. These are all well-known examples through history of where people were in fairly large groups were mind controlled. Now about resisting mind control. Understanding the dynamics and pervasiveness of situational power is essential to learning how to resist it and weaken the dominance of the many agents of mind control who ply their trade daily on all of us behind many faces and fronts. This is a quote by a past APA president, Philip Zimbardo, who did some research into mind control. So understanding it makes you less susceptible to it if you can recognize that the tactics that are being used are the tactics that you learned about. So by getting this lecture today, I hope that you are all a little more resistant to mind control. People who commonly experience great self-doubt have a weak sense of identity. I think this is a very key characteristic or personality trait. And as we said before, personality traits or any kind of traits are not fixed, they are malleable. But they do tend to remain seemingly fixed if nothing is done about them, if you just leave them. So people who commonly experience great self-doubt have a weak sense of identity and show a tendency toward guilt and absolutism, which is black and white thinking. They are more likely to be successfully brainwashed, while a strong sense of identity and self-confidence can make a target more resistant to brainwashing. Mental detachment is one of the prisoner of war survival techniques now taught to soldiers as part of their training. It involves the target psychologically removing himself from his actual surroundings through visualization, the constant repetition of a mantra, and various other meditative techniques. The military also teaches soldiers about the methods used in brainwashing because a target's knowledge of the process tends to make it less effective. That was the first point that I mentioned up on this slide, top of the slide. So it is interesting that the technique of countering mind control actually has to do with meditation. I think that's really interesting because meditation is an Eastern practice. It's not been acknowledged as much in the West until recent decades. But they are teaching this Eastern religious or psychological tool in the military in the West. So I thought that was interesting and neat. Anti-brainwashing or deprogramming, exit counseling. Now this is a topic that is even more controversial than brainwashing in the first place because of the tactics that are used and the assumptions that are made. Ted Patrick charged high fees and he was hired by parents. So parents paid him to kidnap their adult cult members, to kidnap them and bring them out of cults, religious cults, to deprogram them using vile, abusive techniques similar to brainwashing methods used on the prisoners of war. Anti-cults argued that the damage to mental freedom justifies extreme methods to rescue members of mentally imprisoned cult members, and sensationalized cult methods served as support for going to such extreme counter-cult tactics. But to forcefully deprogram cult members is to fail to respect individual religious freedom. Rick Ross, working for the Cult Awareness Network, kidnapped and held an adult cult member for 5 days in captivity to be deprogrammed. That member, Jason Scott, later sued his captor and won about $1 million. So the court recognized that anti-cult exit, deprogramming methods can be just as vile or worse as unethical prisoner of war brainwashing tactics. Anti-cult groups may be fueled by rescued members who are encouraged to blame the cult instead of themselves, scapegoating the cult to remove all guilt from themselves and provide a way out from having to explain why they joined the group or having to defend their beliefs. The anti-cult group encourages the ex-cult members to believe that they are not responsible for their own beliefs and actions. However, to say that they are not responsible serves to make those members more susceptible to joining future cults, ironically. So it's like if you try to brainwash in order to deprogram someone who's already brainwashed, you're just brainwashing them again and making them more susceptible to brainwashing, it seems like. Now, we're getting close to the end of this lecture. In defense of mind control. Mind control is just a strong word for persuasion, as I said before, which is fundamental to how humans interact and communicate with one another. We all know how to influence and be influenced without loss of control and autonomy. Mind control can be a label used when someone disapproves of the new belief system. In essence, it is a valued judgment on a foreign ideology. So if someone didn't like their friend joined some religious group, they might just call it a cult in order to defame it. Critics say it is impossible to remove a person's freedom of belief and of thought or behavior. Conforming to the group is a personal decision. People join groups of their own free will. Religions do not recruit members against their own free will. So all of this is arguing and suggesting that even though people who join cults seem to be mind controlled, yet maybe they joined of their own free will. And who are we to say that they are mind controlled? Maybe we think they're mind controlled, but maybe they're simply joining of their own free will. So it's really quite difficult to be really certain that someone is mind controlled and not choosing of their own free will. We can look at all of the tactics and strategies that the group uses or that the leader uses, and we can say that it's probable or possible that a member got mind controlled, but it's really hard to say for certain. Conclusions. Mind control is contentious because it is based on theory and circumstantial evidence. It is unethical to test mind control claims, so we cannot demonstrate its efficacy in a controlled laboratory setting. Thus, mind control remains indeterminate, which may preserve mind control utility and reach. By acknowledging mind control and its contentiousness, we bring attention on this otherwise dark and ignored matter. In other words, if we don't study it, because we can't, because it's unethical to experimentally induce mind control, so if we never test it and we ignore it, then it remains in the dark. And if it remains in the dark, then people can use it to control people who are not prepared for that, who are not aware of the tactics. So we have to make people aware of it, and yet we can't study it in an ethical way. So it's like a catch-22. So we do the best that we can now. I'm doing the best that I can by educating you on this issue, that it's probable that it happens, that it works, that it can be used against people, but it's contentious still. Number 2, persuasion and influence is ubiquitous in human cultures. Coercive persuasion, or the use of extreme methods of controlling people's beliefs, with or without physical force, is so rarely documented as to cast doubt on whether in fact it exists. The use of deception and indoctrination by cult members may be a little more extreme than normal persuasion and influence, but it may be hasty to conclude that these strategies are removing members' freedom of mind. Thus, indoctrination into an unusual cult may represent an extreme example of a non-extreme phenomenon called persuasion. New members may be said to have changed their beliefs according to their own free will. This view supposes that humans are highly adept at recognizing and counteracting mind control methods. So, whether or not you suppose that humans are, even yourself, are good at recognizing and counteracting mind control methods is a question that only you can answer. Step 3, or conclusion 3. However, such a view goes against psychological findings about individual and group persuasion and a host of social and cognitive science findings that humans are susceptible to numerous tricks which shift their opinions. In short, although we would like to think of the human as fully rational, logical, controlled by personal will, and not swayed by authorities or peer pressures, the evidence suggests that we are highly susceptible to numerous influences, which, when organized together into a program, might affect tremendous power of persuasion. To deny this, whether for short-term or for long-term, dependent upon the particular program and how it is used. To deny this is to deny the findings of decades of psychological research, as well as to increase its potential for abuse. So I'm not saying that you are mind-controlled or that you will be mind-controlled. What I'm saying is that theoretically, mind control can be used against you in a very strong way, and that unless you are extraordinarily strong at defending against it, that it is entirely plausible that you would fall susceptible to mind control. And that's quite a provocative and kind of scary thought, because I have to admit that I myself could be mind controlled. It's just not a very comfortable thought. All right, and here are my references. I primarily used the first 3, especially the first one, and there are some other sources that you might be interested in. And now I want to give you your assignment for today. I'm not saying that class is over yet, but I want you to be sure, and I want to present the assignment at the end of this lecture. That's where I usually give assignments. So here's your assignment for this week. The podcast, I decided to drop your podcast assignment for this week because I want you to focus more on developing your self-created assignment proposal, which is due in a week. So
how about the book report?
The book report is not due next week. It's in the syllabus. It's due
At week 5, I think. Class.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for this assignment, you're going to craft your assignment to last for 2 to 3 months, please. And please include how you will document on a daily or weekly basis your completion of your assignment. So for example, if you want to learn how to swim and you're going to swim 2 times per week, then indicate every time you go swimming, make a tally mark or count how many times you swam that week. And then by the end of the project, you will have a week by week or day by day counting and documenting either yes, you did it, or no, you did not do it. So you're keeping track of your completion of your training, of your habit. And third bullet point, please also include ways to assess or measure your expected outcomes of your assignment. Whether the assignment occurs throughout, assessment occurs throughout, or only at the end. However, I can recommend to you a pre-test and a post-test. That's a nice idea because you don't have to test so many times, only 2 times. Another good strategy is to test on a weekly or monthly basis. It's as you prefer. I think the pre-test, post-test is a good balance. That way you don't have to spend too much time assessing yourself. But sometimes, for example, if your goal is to lose weight, you'd probably want to test on a weekly basis rather than on a monthly basis, because that progress report can sometimes fuel your motivation to continue on a program. All right, so so really, I want you to be creative about what kind of goal or kind of improvement you want to do. It's whatever you like, and your program is of your own design, of your own making. But I want to see the details of your program next week. You will submit that on Blackboard. I'm pretty sure that Blackboard will be up and running this week, because if the administrators don't fix it, I will enroll you one by one, so that you can submit your assignments. And please submit your last week podcast. I'll send you an email or something to let you know that Blackboard is up and ready. Okay, that's the end of this lecture. Now I'd like to give you another 10-minute break, because that was a long lecture. And after the break, I'm going to go to the laboratory part.
Okay.
Okay? See you in 10 minutes. Hello, welcome back.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. All right. Today's lecture it's a heavy day for lecturing. I'm going now to the lab. The lab is kind of like a lecture today, but there is an activity at the end. I'm just looking at the chat box. I see a question, an interesting one. How can we tell or differentiate between an individual to see if he or she is brainwashed or not? I think you would have to through a process of inquiring, you could get a pretty good idea. If you ask, why do you believe that? Why do you say that? If the answer leads back to the leader saying it and the organization saying it, and all of the authority is concentrated in the group and the organization, or that's one clue. But usually the members would point to the explanations that go outside of or beyond. So it may be very difficult. I don't know how we would be able to tell for sure whether someone is mind controlled or not. I think that's a really great question. I'd like to think about it more. Thank you.
Hi, can I ask something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking like what you said, like people that see more as like black and white, like less confident of themselves, are more likely to get brainwashed.
Yeah, why is it that they are more
No,
likely to be?
I'm thinking like, so isn't that like people that see blacks and white are like good people? So they tend to more like kinder people and like more generosity and kind people tend to get like brainwashed more than people that are kind of mean and self-centered.
No, I don't think so. The black and white thinking is, it's a way of thinking about the world as it's actually it's like it's a trait where people want to know the truth of the matter or the reality of the matter one way or the other. They want to know, is it this or that? Should we do this or should we not do this? It's based on a strong need to have an answer, a strong need to be sure of to be sure. Yeah. If you can live with ambiguity, you're more uh, immune to cult influence. But if you need certainty, then that's a kind of hook, because if you need certainty and the cult offers you certainty, then you will go for it, hooked.
Okay.
So it's not based on how nice or kind you are, certainly not. Okay, now I'm going to start our laboratory. So it's basically another lecture, and then it ends with an activity. The activity is discussion based. Mind control with mass media. Again, it's a lot of quotes. Publicity is okay, so the title is Managing Public Perception, and I put managing in italics because managing is a nice word for controlling. Publicity is the deliberate attempt to manage the public's perception of a subject. The subject of publicity include people, for example, politicians and performing artists, goods and services, organizations of all kinds, and works of art or entertainment. So it's basically, okay, managing public perception is publicity, which is protecting the reputation or the image of a brand or of a political group or artist. So it could be used even for individuals or for much larger things like groups or brands. It is without knowledge of the human being, his tendency, his desires, his needs, his psychic mechanisms, his automatisms, as well as knowledge of social psychology and analytical psychology. It is with this knowledge that propaganda refines its techniques. So propaganda uses knowledge of psychology to refine its techniques. And I was remarking, I don't know if I remarked on the slide or not, how we who study psychology and who try to develop this field of knowledge are unintentionally paving the way for more effective mind control, because it is by our knowledge and understanding of psychology that we can use it against ourselves. So, but that's okay. We gotta keep learning, and it's kind of like in developing technology to defend ourselves from others in war, we also invent new weapons to use against others. So it's like we have to keep pushing progress, even though we're likely to use it against ourselves sooner or later. Today's propaganda almost never uses rational or logical arguments. It directly taps into a human's most primal needs and instincts in order to generate an emotional and irrational response. That makes sense, because if you use logic to try to convince someone, we are so used to using logic to counteract, contradict, and argue against. It's not an effective technique. But if we can bypass logic and use emotional tactics, then people won't argue against, and they will be convinced without argument. In the past, censorship worked by blocking the flow of information. In the 21st century, censorship works by flooding people with irrelevant information. That was a quote taken from Harari, and I got that from one of my students' insight journals from last year teaching this course. When I got that insight, I thought, oh, that works perfectly with this lecture, so I added it here. Mind control for the masses? Mass media is the most powerful tool used by the ruling class to manipulate the masses. Mass communication is a necessary tool to ensure the functionality of a large democracy, however, also. It is also a necessary tool for dictatorships. It all depends on its uses. So the tool is neither good nor evil, it's how it's used. Mass media can be used for mind control, or it can be used for educating people to prevent mind control. The mass population versus ruling class dichotomy described in many articles is not a conspiracy theory, but a reality that has been clearly stated in the works of some of the 20th century's most influential men. And I'm going to mention quotes on the next slides from Lippmann, Bernays, and Laswell. They have all declared that the public is not fit to decide their own fate, which is the inherent goal of democracy. What that proposes is that democracy is dead or is a fallacy. So this is very contentious stuff that I'm getting to in the next slides. Instead, they call for a cryptocracy, a hidden government, a ruling class in charge of the bewildered herd. As their ideas continue to be applied to society, it is increasingly apparent that an ignorant population is not an obstacle, and that the rulers must deal with. That it is something that is desirable and indeed necessary to ensure total leadership. An ignorant population does not know its rights, does not seek a greater understanding of issues, and does not question authorities. It simply follows trends. Popular culture caters to and nurtures ignorance by continually serving up brain-numbing entertainment and spotlighting degenerate celebrities to be idolized. Here's a quote. Oops. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. Quote by Thomas Jefferson, one of the US presidents. So we do hope to be free. I hope we don't hope to be ignorant. I don't think that that's something that we should expect or want, but it may be unavoidable. Ignorance is only in comparison to something else. And if there is some intellectual elite some cryptocracy in existence, then by contrast, the masses are ignorant. So if we expect to be ignorant and free, then we're expecting what never was and never will be, according to Thomas Jefferson's quote. All right, now I'm going to present some quotes by those influential people, Lippmann, Bernays, and Laswell. So here's Bernays. Edward Bernays is considered to be the father of public relations. He basically created consumerism by creating a culture wherein Americans bought for pleasure instead of buying for survival. For this reason, he was considered Life magazine's top 100 influential Americans in the 20th century. He shared Walter Lippmann's view of the general population by considering it irrational and subject to the herd instinct. In his opinion, the masses need to be manipulated by an invisible government to ensure the survival of democracy. An invisible government. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country, referring to America. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never seen or heard of. This is a logical result of the way in which our democratic society is organized. Vast numbers of human beings must cooperate in this manner if they are to live together as a smoothly functioning society. Our invisible governors are, in many cases, unaware of the identity of their fellow members in the inner cabinet. Here's a quote by Walter Lippmann. Lippmann, American two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, brought forth one of the first works concerning the usage of mass media in America. In Public Opinion, 1922, Lippmann compared the masses to a great beast and a bewildered herd that needed to be guided by a governing class. He described the ruling elite as a specialized class whose interests reach beyond the locality. This class is composed of experts, specialists, and bureaucrats. According to Lippmann, the experts, who often are referred to as elites, are to be like a machinery of knowledge that circumvents the primary defects of democracy, the impossible ideal of the omnicompetent citizen. The trampling and roaring, bewildered herd has its function to be the interested spectators of action. In other words, not participants, but spectators. Mass media and propaganda are therefore tools that must be used by the elite to rule the public without physical coercion. One important concept presented by Lippmann is the manufacture of consent, which is, in short, the manipulation of public opinion to accept the elite's agenda. It is Lippmann's opinion that the general public is not qualified to reason and to decide on important issues. It is therefore important for the elite to decide for its own good and then sell those decisions to the masses. It has been demonstrated that we cannot rely upon intuition, conscience, or the accidents of casual opinion if we are to deal with the world beyond our reach. More quotes by Lippmann. Political and economic power in the United States is concentrated in the hands of a ruling elite that controls most of the US-based multinational corporations, major communication media, the most influential foundations, major private universities, and most public universities. Lippmann is one of the founding fathers of the Council on Foreign Relations, the most influential foreign policy think tank in the world. Founded in 1921, the Council of Foreign Relations is the key link between the large corporations and the federal government. It has been called a school for statesmen and comes close to being an organ of what C.J. Wright Mills has called the power elite, a group of men similar in interests and outlook, shaping events from invulnerable positions behind the scenes. The creation of the United Nations was a council project, as well as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Some current members of the CFR, Council of Foreign Relations, include David Rockefeller, Dick Cheney, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, megachurch pastor Rick Warren, and the CEOs of major corporations such as CBS, Nike, Coca-Cola, and Visa. Now I go on to a couple other smart thinkers, Laswell and Huxley. When elites lack the prerequisite force to compel obedience, social managers must turn to a whole new technique of control, largely through propaganda. He added the conventional justification: we must recognize the ignorance and stupidity of the masses and not succumb to democratic dogmatisms about men being the best judges of their own interests. That was a quote by Laswell. And here by Huxley: impersonal forces over which we have almost no control seem to be pushing us all in the direction of the brave new worldly nightmare. And this impersonal pushing is being consciously accelerated by representatives of commercial and political organizations who have developed a number of new techniques for manipulating, in the interest of some minority, the thoughts and feelings of the masses. And that is the end of that lab lecture. And now we are to the point where I'd like to divide you into groups.
Behind the scenes, like even though it's not directly being controlled by a person, like it's like kind of the idea of like we don't have free will in a way, which I am against. So yeah.
Certainly, thank you.
I'm for the whole media brainwashing thing, because even though we do have a sense of free will, it is often, what should I say,
Do we?
it takes a backseat in certain situations like de-individualization, when there's uproars, when people perceive that some of their rights are taken away, we sort of just kind of lose control. And the reason I believe that the mass media is trying to like take control is that there's certain things that often happen. There's always in news outlets, there's things they always like to admit. In social media, which has become prevalent, there's always arguments and there's always misinformation that keeps being tossed around, that keeps causing people to go, how do I say this, become frenzied in a sense. I mean, look at America. There's tons of riots every day. There's always something to complain about, and it's always because of information they're given. Like a person has been killed unfairly, and then there's riots. Person that got hurt, then there's riots. There's always something. There's always a bias with these things. There's always things that they're excluding or
Yeah.
push in front. So I think there is some control. And I guess that control can be counted as brainwashing. There's always a change. There's always a control that makes us want to do certain things. So I believe that there is some of it. It's not like total control, but it's trying to change our behaviors in some way, trying to lead us to do this. So that's what I believe in.
Very
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
I agree with Josh as well.
Why do you? So basically, if you say that there's being mind control going on, there have to be a controller. But rather than thinking that term, why don't you think that it's a naturally occurring phenomenon in an ongoing social process, the evolution of civilization? As it is, it's just like perhaps as we develop such occurrence as you would suggest being mind control would occur naturally as the transfer of information developed and the population increased, the clash of idea increased. There's no such subject as a controller or a mind control being ongoing, but rather it is just simply a phenomenon of ideas and information crashing and being overly shared.
That's a fair point. Thank you. Anyone who wants to speak,
But
please turn
yeah,
on
but I
your
actually
video.
agree with like the brainwashed, because just look at the politics. Okay, not no country, but just look at like North Korea. They're gonna get killed if they say something bad about the ruler. They like try to like cut off like any media and everything. You know, like only the high level people can access the internet in North Korea. So yeah, brainwash actually exists.
Right. Good. Thank you. Please turn on your video when you speak.
I mean, like when me and my group like decided we are against it, but maybe it's because of how I like interpret the question as well. Because like it's like the idea that we are being mind controlled. That so I interpret it as like right now, because I think like most people in Thailand aren't, because like people keep to realize what's going on. Like right now is when people start to like step up, and then like the protests and stuff. I think we aren't. Maybe we were, but like not maybe. Yeah, probably were, because like, but right now I think like many people are like kind of waking up and like realize what's going on and can like distinguish what's like real and what's not. But kind of so, and also like I think this is only like my perception of the word control. I think we are like just heavily influenced, because like I think because like the media like definitely like influence how we see things, how like they villainize like people, and then they just like they have like a huge effect, and they try to like villainize the like protester, for example, make them seem like the bad person, like creating like yeah. But I think like most people know that it's not true, and then like so I don't think we are. I mean, the majority. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense.
It makes sense.
Right. Thank you. I understand what you're saying, that the media can cast people in a positive or negative light just depending on how they portray them. So they can villainize. Thank you. I think Nata Seat raised his hand. So Nata Seat, do you want to speak next?
Oh, wait a second. Let the other person speak first.
Okay, go ahead. Anyone else?
Oh, when I was saying about the mind controlling thing, I think it's because it's also my interpretation of the question. I thought it was more like, is the media trying to control us rather than the media is controlling us? Because I agree with the people who spoke before me in defense of them not believing that, because they don't really have like perfect control. They try to change to control how we act and stuff like that. But I also believe that we're becoming more skeptical as time goes on, with all the leaks, with all the people giving information that wasn't really readily available. And look at Facebook. They went to court because they were stealing information. I also believe that all of us are becoming skeptical, but I think it's just my interpretation of the question that made me go for, because I thought it meant like, is the media trying to shape the way shape the way we think? Is the media in brainwashing in a sense of shaping it, moving it, not control everything, but control enough? But I'm not saying that they are doing it now as if they're successful, because I feel like we're becoming more skeptical over the years, and we're definitely not as easy to herd than before. So
thank you. Anyone else?
Can I give my group opinion?
Yes.
Okay, so our group share an example of political matter in these days. I mean, in our opinion, I think that teenage in these days most likely to give less interest in politician things, but after the mass media is more is easier for us to approach, so it is some kind of link or relate to my control.
Yes.
And also like some popular actor or actress in nowadays, there are a lot of people follow them, and they follow everything that their idol do. Their idol buy something, they will follow them. And for example, I don't know that you know, like Yaya, she like plant trees in her house, and many people's in Thailand like getting
Follow
to
her. Yeah.
follow her, plant trees in everywhere in the house. Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. So we think that it affects us.
It
massively.
does. We are affected by our role models.
Professors.
Thank you. Yes.
Following up from what Josh said, I think his idea is slippery slope. So if you suggest that the media is trying to control us, and that our level of skepticism have been rising, and that people are more informed, what you said is there are no third party that are controlling that the rise of skepticism. The influencers, they are affiliated with a group, they have sponsor. What you say is there's no a controller
กูยกมือ
behind
ไป
the
นานแล้ว
scene.
แล้วเขาพูดถึง
So it's a slippery slope then, because we can't be certain that there are no, we can't be completely certain, 100% certain that there are no a third party or a fourth party controlling behind the scene.
That's a good point. I see what you're saying. You're saying that, yes, they influence us, but is their agenda from themselves or is it from third party or fourth party, right? That's a really good point.
Hi, what about 112?
What was that?
You know, political. What about 112? There's rule, there's like laws, and it affects.
Yeah. I saw Natasit's hand raised. Do you want to say anything?
Yes. So we would like to say about our group's take on mind control. We were discussing and we said yes, we believe that we are being mind controlled because as of today the media everybody can choose which TV program, which channel of media they want to receive. It may seem like we have the right to choose what we want to, where the information we can get from. But however, because in reality, we have to stay in groups in society. We are influenced by other people. We are influenced by our friends. And so if let's say in group A, everybody watches channel A on TV and one person watches channel B, that person would likely be discriminated or left out from the group because
peer pressure.
Peer pressure.
You're
So
right.
that is our group's take on mind control.
Now, I don't want to hold people too long after the end of class officially has come. So I will say, are there any final remarks that you want to make before we take a vote?
What if like after the class is over, so like the people who like wanted to go, they can go, but like the people who want to stay and they still have something to say, like let's stay.
Yes.
I think that's a good
ทุก
idea.
คนเข้าโซมไม่เคยโหวตไม่ทุกคนต้องเข้า
I think that's a good idea. So how about if we give the vote, so we catch people's vote before they leave, and then I will keep the class going for another 10 to 15 minutes so that people can express more of what their group talked about. So I'm opening the vote now. It's 2 questions. Whoops, wrong one. Okay, class vote. Here we go. Launch poll. All right.
It was one question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's another question, but I'll put that up after this one's finished. Are you guys seeing the real-time results like I am?
I am not.
No.
No.
We can't see the results, only you can.
Yeah, until like the poll is ended.
I see. Well, 60 out of 66 have voted. 90, 62. Got another 4 people to vote. 3 people more. Two more. Not increasing. Oh, here we, okay. All right, well, the percent that I'm getting is 75% voted yes, and 17% no, and 8% undecided. So by majority vote, it appears that our class has mostly voted that we are mind controlled by mass media. And so 50 people said yes, 11 people no, and 5 undecided. All right, we got about 66 students voting, so that's a nice, good number. Great. Okay, I'll end the poll now. Thank you guys. That was awesome. All right, let me go ahead and, okay, so I can click share results so you can see. Okay. And I also want to give you one more question. Let's see here. This is a kind of more exact feeling it up.
What about you, Mr. Jason? What's your take on this? If you can.
Right, I did not vote, so I should vote. Mine would be yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And how about for the second question?
Aha. My vote would be, well, don't be influenced by me, but I would be somewhere not in the extreme ends, somewhere middle range.
Where's the second question?
It's on screen now.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think you shouldn't share the answer to the class because like
I
people,
didn't know
because
there's a
people will
second
be
question.
influenced by your answer.
But it's not really an answer, but more of an opinion, right? Because there's no right or wrong to this discussion.
I mean, like, but like people could like get influenced by like they want to be like the same with other people, you know.
Yeah, we have some conformist bias.
That's why we have private voting booths.
I mean, like in the call,
Yeah,
we're
confirmation
talking about
bias basically.
From people who spoke, I thought most of us would say no, but seems like a lot of people said yes in the end.
I think like sometimes we're viewing it on like only political views on like how we are being affected by mass media on political view, but let's say just like some slightly like let's say fashion.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way we dress, we are somehow like still affected by that mass media somehow. It's not like we were like so focused on political views and like we're not seeing like in other aspects too.
Yeah.
I think
but
it's
like
I think it's also
depends on
about that.
people's point of view, you know. Like
Right.
agree to
Yeah,
some
true.
extent.
Right now,
I think the
because
Thai society is not quite tolerant on having different views or opinions or even
Yeah, like
dressing
different
differently.
Yeah.
God.
I think
like
it's a
different
cultural thing
cultures,
too.
different like
So,
have
Yeah.
different opinions on things.
Let me jump in right here real quick and just point out that the results of the poll are now available and are displayed on your screen, so you can see
yeah.
a lot of people felt somewhat and somewhere between somewhat and quite a bit. So I think that that's very interesting results, and we can see how people, if they're forced to answer yes or no, they have to answer one or the other. They answered yes, but really their feeling is somewhere between like 3.5 to 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. So excellent, thank you. That's very interesting. And now anyone who wishes to exit the class is welcome to. Meanwhile, the rest of us will keep on for another 10 or so minutes let's continue to share your thoughts and views as you discussed in your group, please.
I don't know. I think still I realized that I kind of like interpret the question differently from most people. I just focus on the word like are, like we are. I don't know why, but yeah. So I thought, because I mean, and the other person mentioned about like the fashion aspect. Yes, like beauty standards and stuff. I think we are influenced, but still the word control in my mind is really extreme, as in like on the
Yeah, like the
delusional
language
side.
used and how
Yeah.
we like interpret the question is really different. Because I agree with who are you talking? Like who is talking right now? Sorry.
I'm Fa. Hello.
Yeah, I agree to Fa as well. Because like the word control is very powerful.
That's a really good point. You know, if we had changed the word in the survey to mind influence, we would probably get different results.
Yeah, then I would have voted yes if that's the word. But the word control in my head is just like on the extreme end, like delusional, as in like no thoughts, like the person is not thinking anymore. They just like follow it, everything. That's the word control to me.
Like a
kind of.
puppet.
Like a puppet.
Yeah,
True.
maybe. Yeah, so like when I see the word control, I voted no because of that, like as well.
It just feels so extreme. Like
Yeah.
for me, I feel like if we talk about the big problems like politics, we will not feel like we are being controlled because we already lose our trust in the media. But for the smaller aspect, like for fashion or something else, we still have those social norms that was caused by them.
Yeah.
You're right.
No, but isn't it also because like we tend to not like to fall behind the group of people? Like we would want to be accepted by the majority and not being left out alone because we don't want people to think that we are weird or like we're different from the others.
Yeah.
That's
I
why
agree
we
with
like
you.
yeah.
I agree with
So,
that.
also the control thing when I think it was Fa when she was talking about like how the word control like influenced her thoughts.
Yeah.
It relates like I don't know if it relates back to like the car experiment, the one where like because they changed the words from like collided to like bumped or like hit.
Oh,
And
is that
so-
Loftus and Palmer?
Good connecting
Wait, this
to that
case study.
the word choice affects the opinion completely. So mind control versus mind influence.
But it influence a type of control though, like a very small amount of
Yeah,
control.
like a slight control.
You're right.
Actually, you can look at it from two different perspectives. We influence people by not actually aiming to influence others. We influence others simply just by existing. My presence here talking to you right now influence you not to talk. That's simply just me doing what I'm doing, not having any intentions of actually trying for you not to talk, but having that effect.
Precisely. Great point.
Yeah, that's really true. I like it. I like that point a lot.
I think
yeah.
sorry.
You got first. This week
I
first.
think the thing with media is because there's always like a narrative and there's always an intention. And so long as there's an intention to put information out there, because like the way we see things, our opinions are formed by like the information that we received. And because this information is influenced by a narrative that was sort of predetermined by media outlets, I think in a way they're like either unconsciously or in some cases deliberately trying to exert a small amount of control on us. But because nowadays we have more access to lots of different types of media and different opinions, then it sort of cancels out. And so in a way it does control us, but it also doesn't so long as you use your brain to think about it.
One of the fundamental problems that I see here is that whether you subscribe to the idea of determinism or you subscribe to the idea of free will, if you subscribe to the idea of determinism, thereby your every logical action, your every thought every nowadays unconscious thoughts are predetermined. That have a predetermined reason for appearing that way or for occurring in such a way. And if you subscribe to the idea of free will, then you have control over that. So there's two different point of view here. And if you say that you are being controlled, then there's an existence that controlling the reason or the cause that make you appear in such a way. Thereby you are subscribing to the determinism, but the fallacy in that is that the reason for appearing that way could be dated back to, as far as we could think of it, to the Big Bang, say. And what would you say being controlled as God, or would you say just like some other existence?
Thank you, Jacqueline. You're saying that if you take a deterministic perspective, then obviously we're all controlled. So that's a good point. Thank you.
Right. But I mean, obviously, like, there's a lot of censorship going on the media. I'm just like
Yeah.
adding to it, like most of people, like the people higher up, they can like hide something from the public, or like, yeah, they can like paint themselves as like good people and then like hide their dirt as, yeah, something like that. So yeah, it's heavily censored and stuff, and like it have been successful, but now, yeah. I mean, yeah.
Are you concerned about social media censorship as a way of influencing and controlling opinions on social media?
I mean, I'm actually thinking about like mass news channels. Like when I talk about that, like they just, it seems like they are covering everything, but like the like situation that's like bad and it will affect like the people in power, they like make it lighter-ish, even though they cover it, but they doesn't make it seem too bad, and they villainize the people who's like who they can like do that, because like the people who's like not in power, they can't do anything ish. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's like they can whip up the mass opinion for or against various issues, depending
Right.
on how they cast light on the issue. They could cast it in a
Right.
glorious light, or in a dark, shadowy kind of take.
Yeah, kind of like that. I mean, it's
Power.
like not like that they are like not covering it, they are, but like they can still change people's like narrative.
That's power, isn't it?
Yep.
The power of the media.
Yeah, because I think it's because how most of people receive their information. Like for this situation about our political, most of the younger generation, we didn't even think about taking a news from the media, like Thailand TV or those whatever channel that is online in our TV. But we decided to receive the information from Twitter. It's just like that.
Right.
So it's like, why some people think that, oh, แป๊บนึงนะลืมว่าจะพูดอะไร I just forgot what I'm trying to say.
Good point. The existence of Twitter and other social media could potentially counteract the forces of any particular media.
Yeah, like they can avoid the censorship that they're trying to do to us.
Right, yeah. Good point. All right, maybe another 1 minute or so?
I mean, I was about to say like the other person, I think it was Trip, I'm not sure, like he talked about like everyone's like is always like being influenced yeah, like we are all like influencing each other thing. Yeah, I totally agree with that, because like this idea of like influencing like the public, it's, I don't think it's just like because of the media. It's just, I think it's have always been like that. Like in a society, there's gotta be the majority and the minority. Like, and then like the people who is more like known, or the people who's like have more power, obviously gonna have like bigger influence on the people. Like in the podcast, like the woman that went to Turkey and then tried to like spread the idea of like something that's similar to like vaccination. Yeah, that story. Like if after she like make the influential people like try it, then it's became like it influenced like other people to like trust it in a sense. So like it's not just the media, it's just that like the people that, yeah, I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, influence is not evenly distributed. Some people are much more influential than others. And I
I'd
think,
like to
Yeah, I actually like that point.
I'd like to say something about this topic, like the influence and the mind control,
yeah,
because
speak.
in my opinion, about the influence, I feel like sometimes, for example, in advertisement, they, yeah, it's, I think it's can be called influence, but at the same time, they are trying to, they have the purpose behind it. For example, they want us to buy their products. So I think it can be considered mind control too, but maybe it's not in the extreme level, like the in the politics topic or like propaganda or something like that.
But some people are
personally,
more easily influenced more than the others, right?
And I think that, Namon, you're making a really good point that we've kind of earlier alluded to, is that mind control sounds so strong and influence sounds much more everyday, and they're one and the same thing. They're just, it's a spectrum, I think.
yeah.
Yeah,
I kind of feel like that.
I agree. I think that's an important conclusion from this topic.
We've been talking, like, we seem to relate brainwashing with like negative acts. So is there any situation that brainwashing can be related to like positive consequences?
I think so. I think that's a really good point. Like now during this pandemic, wouldn't it be good if we could brainwash people to wear masks and wash their hands and keep their distance from people? Wouldn't that be a good positive use of mind control?
I think so.
That's a really good.
That's a really good point.
All right.
All right, thank you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and end the class. Thank you for your participation and sharing your views. This was really great. Good to hear from you all.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr.
thank you.
And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, bye.